Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, former NATO Ambassador Kurt Volker discusses the latest provocations coming out of North Korea. Also tonight, our weekly update from the Arizona State Legislature, and Ruth Pointer of the Pointer Sisters talks about her new book. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. America's National Intelligence Director said this week that North Korea is now the top nuclear threat to the U.S. Here to talk about that and other foreign affairs issues is former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, who is now the head of ASU's McCain Institute. Good to see you again.
Thanks. Great to be here, Ted.
Good to have you here. National Intelligence Director also said that he can't recall a more diverse array of challenges and crises. Interesting way to put it, huh?
It is. Interesting choice of words. And there I would have to agree, because we have indeed a diverse array of threats. We have North Korea, was just mentioned, crazy guy with nukes. We've got terrorists like ISIS. We've got failing states like in Libya. We have failing states like Afghanistan, where we're engaged in a military operation. We have big authoritarian states like Russia with lots of nuclear weapons. We have big powers like China that are expanding their zones of influence. All of these happening at the same time.
And I always refer to these as low-grade fevers, but any conflicts involved, it always seems like something's rumbling.
Yeah, well, this is where I think that maybe even low-grade fever doesn't do it justice, because some of these do erupt pretty severely. That's what I think Clapper is talking about when he talks about North Korea. They only have a handful of nuclear weapons, but the prospect that they might actually consider using one is much higher than you would place it for others.
Do you think that they're more of a threat than Iran right now?
Than Iran, yes. I don't think Iran actually has a nuclear weapon that it can use right now. It's going to get there, but it's not going to do that. And I don't think that they would as easily intend to use it. However, Iran is engaged in other conflicts in the Middle East right now, sometimes in ways that we're supportive of, like working with the Iraqi government against ISIS, but in other ways that we're completely opposed to, like supporting Hezbollah or supporting the Assad regime or supporting Hamas in Israel. So we have challenges with Iran, but they're not nuclear challenges yet.
As far as North Korea is concerned, they've expanded their weapons-grade nuclear fuel, according to this report.
Yep.
Satellite launch Sunday. What was that? Just to show everyone that they can launch and they can.
Well, to test. I mean, it's a show. Yes, the world will see it, and that we are developing our intercontinental ballistic missile capability, and also to test so that they can monitor. And apparently, this one went off reasonably well. And so you have the effort to test a hydrogen bomb a few weeks ago. Disputes over whether they succeeded or not, but they're certainly claiming an interest in doing it. That's worrying. They developed the missiles that they can deliver these things with. They're storing materials, so it is very troubling what they're doing.
How about the idea, and I was reading that we were kind of in cahoots there with South Korea, maybe Japan as well, to help build some kind of missile defense system aimed only at North Korea. Is that feasible? Is it viable?
Again, it gets back to this idea that if there's a small number, very small number of warheads, not like we're talking about with Russia or with China, but a handful, 5, 6, that might be able to be launched, you could put in place a missile defense system that would be hitting a bullet with a bullet that would be able to take it out. And so there are both near-term potential missile defense capabilities that exist, as well as longer-range ones that are being developed. We even have some deployed in the western part of the United States, Alaska and California. So there is an effort to try to defend ourselves against a rogue missile launch, and now they're looking more closely at can we also help defend our allies against a rogue missile launch.
China apparently not amused by this idea of a missile defense system.
Well, no, they're not.
Well, what is the deal with China? I mean, China seems to be North Korea's only friend out there, only big-time friend. What is China getting out of this relationship?
Well, first off, it is an economic relationship between China and North Korea. North Korea is almost wholly dependent upon China. They do see North Korea as a wedge that can divide the Korean peninsula. Otherwise, Korea would unite under a democratic government. It can be a thorn for the United States and Japan, which they like because they have a long-standing history and animosity toward Japan. And China, I think, would like to manage the problem with North Korea rather than just remove it. And China's also very sensitive about any kind of regime change because there's a lot of people who would like to change the Chinese regime as well.
I see. So don't get the wrong idea, in other words.
That's right.
All right, let's move over to what looks to be a a meeting in Brussels tomorrow regarding ISIS. It looks like the U.S. is trying to get lots of folks, especially those in the Middle East, to do something, to get a coalition together and do something. Again, how viable is that?
Well, it needs more U.S. leadership if it's going to work, and I don't believe the U.S. wants to play more of a leadership role than it already is. We are bombing ISIS, we're bombing them in Syria, we're bombing them in Iraq. We've got a few other allies with us doing that. But bombing alone is not going to do it without ground forces. Ground forces could be available from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, maybe the UAE, maybe others in the region. The Kurds have really fought hard in this. But no one is pulling this together into a coherent single operation that's going to take and hold territory and provide a safe space for Syrian people. And only the U.S. leadership could do that. And I don't think we're willing to put our feet on the ground to make that happen.
Indeed, and it's almost, is it even possible? Because you read that the Turks, they care most about the Kurds. The Sunnis, they care most about Iran and Assad. Most of these Sunni governments, ISIS is not is ISIS the #1 enemy for anyone over there?
It is one for everybody. Whether it's #1 really depends on who you're talking about. But I think the way that I would rather think about this if I were in the U.S. administration right now, I'd say everybody has some interest. Can we find overlapping interests that we can at least agree on a few things? And one of those few things should be we all have an interest in getting rid of ISIS. It may not be top priority for some. And I think that part of the deal in that is that we've got to work with our actual longstanding allies in the region, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE, the Kurds, all of whom are deeply concerned about Iran and deeply concerned about Assad staying in power. We've got to be able to work with them on what a solution to Syria would look like in order to gain their support and their trust. And that would involve, I believe, some kind of division of Syria at this point. I don't see the country coming back. There will be an Alawite area, a Shia area of Syria that is continued to be supported by Iran and by Shia. And I think everyone's going to have to live with that. But they couldn't live with it if that was claiming to dominate all of the Sunni areas that it has until now.
So the bottom line is that military coalition is not as strong as it could be.
Yeah, if no one's willing to lead, including the United States, then it's a lot of talk and a lot of finger pointing.
Okay. All right. Good to see you again.
Thanks
for joining us.
Get the inside scoop on what's happening at Arizona PBS. Become an insider. You'll receive weekly updates on the most anticipated upcoming programs and events. Get the insider delivered to your email inbox. Visit azpbs.org to sign up today.
Public safety pension reform and tax credits for attending firearms safety classes are among the major issues at the state legislature this week. Here with our weekly legislative update is Hank Stevenson of the Arizona Capitol Times. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
You know, I mentioned those are big issues, but let's start with another one. These JTEDs, these Joint Technical Education Districts, career and technical education, $30-some-odd million cut. Everyone's, raising holy you-know-what about that. What's the latest?
So the legislature seemed poised to restore that cut. It was a delayed cut, so it still hasn't gone into effect, won't go into effect until July, but they really need to reverse those cuts by mid-May in order to give the schools time to budget with that money still left in there. There was kind of a whole lot of talk about it since last year, and especially since the legislative session kicked off in January. Lawmakers, rank and file lawmakers were ready to do this on day one, restore these cuts. The opposition has been mostly from the top in the House and the Senate, kind of leadership there has been somewhat opposed to it, but it seemed like last week the dam really broke. There was a whole new bill introduced, tons of co-sponsors on the House version. Everyone had this big kumbaya moment yesterday in the House where they unanimously approved this restoration. And today it was scheduled for a vote from the full Senate, and at the very last minute, Senate President Andy Biggs left the floor, just kind of didn't do it, and everyone was kind of left wondering what's up. From what we heard, in between when that happened and when I left the office this afternoon to come over here, it seems like Governor Doug Ducey called Senate President Andy Biggs and said, do not send this bill to me before you approve the budget. It's not uncommon for a governor to not want budget bills before the actual budget, but this is one of those issues where this game of chicken could get very interesting in that the legislature has more than enough votes to override a veto if they do decide to send it to the governor, and he does veto it.
Right. So that's interesting. He's basically isn't necessarily against the legislation, just doesn't want to see any of that kind of legislation before you send the budget. As you mentioned, we've had governors say this before, request this before.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard line for governors. There's a lot of different ways that this could shake out. One of the simplest ways we were kind of thinking is that Ducey would just let it slide and maybe write a letter saying, hey, next time don't do this, because the pressure's been there for a long time.
Right.
Lawmakers are really ready to do this. They want to do this, and they have to some degree a timeline to do this.
If the governor gets his way and the Senate president comes back and says, we're going to hold off on this for a while until X, Y, and Z, the budget is taken care of, is there a chance that the more you hold off on this, the fire gets low and all of a sudden something wouldn't pass? Or is it so strong? It could survive, couldn't it?
Yeah, there's no chance really that it's going to go from 30 votes and 60 votes in the Senate and House to not enough to pass. I mean, it's unanimous now, so maybe a few people decide we don't need this money or it could be better spent, but there's no question of it getting out of the legislature. The real question is, this wasn't included in Ducey's budget proposal at the beginning of the year. He had an alternate plan that would have given them $30 million over a course of 3 years on kind of a
grant kind of situation.
Exactly. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see who blinks first on this one.
So a little bit of drama there, a little bit of drama with this public safety worker pension. The idea was to change this. Cities have been clamoring for this. I know we saw Senator Debbie Lesko last week, I believe it was, come out with a big idea. The entire Senate was happy with it. It goes to the House.
And it's languished.
What's going on?
There's a couple of competing theories here. The House Appropriations Chairman, Justin Olson, has been the most vocal opponent of this piece of legislation. Also, the House Majority Whip has been pretty vocal. But it seems like a few people at the top who don't want to see this thing move through, whereas the rank and file members in both the Republican and the Democratic caucus are mostly on board with this. There's no question of if it goes up for a vote, will it pass? It will. The question is, when do they put it up for a vote? They really need to get it done by Monday, February 15th, in order to give election officials enough time to put the constitutional part of this on the May special election ballot. If it's not voted on by then the whole thing is moot, at least until November, when voters would have a chance to approve it then. It's not scheduled during the House Committee of the Whole. House votes tomorrow. They don't work on Friday. So unless something changes, we're cutting it down to the wire here.
So we got about a minute left here. Again, what is the opposition to this? If you got the entire Senate in support, the majority in the House in support, who's got the problem, and what's the problem?
Well, there are, I think the problem is a couple of groups, Goldwater Institute, the ATRA, a big tax research group, very powerful at the Capitol, say essentially that it doesn't go far enough, that this isn't going to solve the problem, that the projected savings aren't going to come to fruition, things like that. But really the fact that they've even got a deal that most everyone agrees is something, if not everything, is amazing, because this is such a hot button issue between union groups and Republican lawmakers and the Goldwater Institute and all these various fighting factions at the Capitol. And the fact that they were able to come together, at this point the real opposition is politics, petty bargaining, things like that.
But still, all in all, this is a slam dunk to pass if it ever gets a shot, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And the governor's on board. He will mount a campaign during the May special election, a vote yes on his Prop 123 and a vote yes on this. It's really not a question of can it be done. It's are these few key people going to keep it from happening.
All right. Good stuff, Hank. Good to see you here.
Thanks for having me on.
The Pointer Sisters were among the most successful music acts of the 1970s and early 80s, and if you were anywhere near a radio or a TV, you shared the same space with the singing group's distinctive energy and sound.
Raise a toting Jim, tell butcher now toting Natty, right. Tell old bass talking Fanny, tell him we gonna pitch a ball down to this Union Hall. We gonna rump and stomp till midnight. We gonna fuss and fight till daylight. We gonna hit the wang dang all night long, yeah. All night long, all night long. Come on, all night long, all night long. We gonna hit the wang dang all night long.
Ruth Pointer's life as a Pointer sister is chronicled in a new book titled Still So Excited. She's in the Valley to talk about her new book and to headline ASU's Project Humanity Spring 2016 campaign kickoff, Humanity 101, Creating a Movement. We welcome Ruth Pointer.
Oh,
Arizona
thank you
Horizon.
so much.
What do you
Thank
think when you see that?
Oh my God, I'm thinking, what was I thinking with that big pink rose in the top of my head?
I mean, the book is fantastic. I mean,
Thank you.
for those of us who remember the day, and you guys really were everywhere. Did it come up? Did it feel like an overnight thing to you?
It did feel like that. It did feel like that, even though we knew that that wasn't really the case, but it did feel like that.
And as far as having that kind of success, how did you handle it? I mean, if you read the book, we kind of know how you handle it. But you tell us.
Well, we were very naive. You know, we grew up in a very religious home, but both parents were ministers, and so there were a lot of restrictions and a lot of things that we just weren't exposed to as far as the real world. And when you're thrown out there in the real world, you might be. I know that we were a little too trusting of everybody,
Yeah.
you know, and expecting everybody to be honest with you and tell you the truth and tell you what's real. And we soon found out that was not real.
The music business will change that tune pretty quickly. Huh?
Yeah, real fast.
I know in the book you wrote that you were so insulated and your parents were so protective that you really do think that made a difference when you finally, when you became an adult. It's almost like you guys were set free.
Yeah, we were. I know I was. I mean, I wanted to try and do everything that I thought my friends were doing, you know, and have the fun that I thought they were having. And it turned into a monster,
Yeah.
you know, because it wasn't what I expected it to be.
I want to get to some of those the darker days in a second here, but when the first start, when did, I know that your sisters kind of got started before you.
Yes.
When did you know? When did they know? When did everyone know? You guys are good.
You know, I always knew we were good. And when my sisters, Bonnie, June, and Anita started singing backup, and they were sort of in the whole scene of Fillmore West and around, and during the late 60s, and I would go and watch them, you know, I would go and watch them, and I would think, wow, yeah, this is, you know, even though we did sing in the church, and I knew we sounded good,
Yeah.
but it never occurred to me to be a professional at that time. And when I saw them headed in that direction, I just thought, wow, you know, we've really got something here that we didn't know we had.
And when things got good, things kind of got a little bad as well, as far as abuse and stuff like this. So bad, and you wrote about this, that it still bothers you to this day, how that church community reacted to your dad. Talk to us about that.
Well, things got bad because, you know, we were naive. I ended up having a child out of wedlock, and the church didn't like it, and they sent around a petition, actually, to get my dad out of the church, and eventually they did, and it really broke his heart.
Yeah.
And because we were so trusting of what we were being taught at that time, that, you know, God will supply all your needs, and just take it to the Lord in prayer, and everything's going to be wonderful. And well, that's what we thought. That's what I thought anyway, that, you know, living a Christian life was going to make everything all right. And my perception of everything all right was everything going my way.
Well, that's true. And it is interesting. At one point in the book, I mean, you are very stark in saying that you hope your children will understand and forgive you for being the kind of parent you originally were.
Yeah.
You weren't a very good parent, huh?
I don't think so. I mean, I was not there. You know, how good can you be if you're not present, you know?
Yeah.
And even when I was present, I was high and didn't want to be bothered. Couldn't answer those everyday questions that I know now that children have, you know, because I have twins, 22 years old, that I've really raised myself, along with a lot of help. But it really, really exposed me to a lot of everyday things, little bitty questions that you just don't. My daughter just called me 5 seconds before I walked out here. She's in college, but she called me to ask me about cooking some chicken that's frozen. Just little details like that, that all of a sudden are just so real to me.
Does it feel like that person back in the 70s is the same person sitting here now? Do you feel like the same person?
No.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
So when you watch a video like we just showed, is that the same person?
I really don't know. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
You know, I would hope that she was in there somewhere trying to get out.
Yeah. Well, before she did get out, and before, you know, the redemption, it's a great story. Now, what, 30 plus years now, clean and sober, something along those lines?
Yes.
All right. Top of the, you were the Carol Burnett show, the Mike Douglas show,
Flip
Car
Wilson,
Wash, Flip Wilson,
Helen
Car
Reddy,
Wash. I still
Cher.
remember. There you are with Carol Burnett. I mean, you guys were everywhere with Richard Pryor and Car Wash. You were everywhere. When it was happening, did you hang on to anything, or was it just flying by?
It was flying by. Believe me, it was flying by. I mean, we were so naive and inexperienced, and it was coming at us so fast. We were doing these television shows in between touring.
Yeah.
You know, and in between recording albums. All of that was going on at the same time. I look at other groups and I see them taking time out to record an album. They go to Hawaii, they go to islands to record an album. We never had those kind of luxuries. You know, it was always, you got to get this done in 3 weeks, and
so
that's what we did.
Were you having fun?
We were having fun too. We tried to anyway, you know, and I can't say that it was all bad.
Yeah.
You know.
When did the bad times surpass the fun?
The bad times surpassed the fun when my body started to give out, and I got sick, you know, from just beating up my body and not taking care of myself physically. You know, when you're using drugs, no one tells you that you're gonna not really take care of your health. You just think you're having fun, and, you know, and things just go along as you wish they would, but you're not eating properly, you're not exercising, you're not keeping appointments at doctors and taking care of yourself, and those things went out the window. I didn't even think about that. The next thing I knew, I had viral meningitis.
My goodness.
I didn't even know where it came from.
Yeah.
You know.
Was that the low point? What was the low point?
That was a very low point. Yeah, and I was on the road when it happened. We
Yeah.
had to cancel shows, and doctors told me, you know, your immune system is beat up.
If that had happened 10 years prior, would that have been the low point? I mean, did you have to hit the low point from a variety of angles to change?
I really don't know. I really don't know. I just know that when it hit, I was looking at things a little different. You know, I don't know that it would have changed anything, you know, because I do recall several times feeling like I needed to change some things, and one of my issues was weight gain. which I know is a big issue for women, you know, and that's what got me started, was taking, you know, barbiturates and
My goodness.
pills to not get fat.
Yeah, well, you got out of it, you climbed out of it, you
Yes.
survived. Again, 30 plus years now, clean and sober. When you wrote the book, you're right, you're going through a lot of difficult times. I mean, this is a fascinating read here with the music industry. If you're interested in the music industry or your life or just music in general, but it's also a family story.
Yeah.
When you were writing this, was it difficult to write things about sisters? 'Cause
Yes.
some of your sisters had some rough goes as well.
Yes, it was difficult, you know, and I have to say that I didn't really go into elaborating on anyone else's life but my own. I love my sisters, and I didn't want to do anything to disappoint them or hurt them. And we had a great time together, and we have a great relationship, you know. We've had a great career, and I love them so much that I just wanted to write about myself, you know.
Yeah, and now we're looking at the kind of the latest or one of the later versions there of the point. Who are we looking at there?
That's my granddaughter on my left, you know, well, my left on the picture, it's Anita, my
Yeah.
sister, and on my right on the picture, it's my granddaughter, Sadako.
Isn't that something? What does that tell you?
Tells me I'm old.
A granddaughter's a Pointer sister. So as far as the book, what do you want folks to take? When we read this,
Yes.
I know what I got from it,
Yes.
but in general, what do you want people to take from this?
I want people to understand that, you know, it's a tough world out there. And so many times, especially today, I see young people going, you ask them what do they want to be as adults, and they say, we want to be famous, I want to be famous. And it's so much more than what they expect, you know.
Yeah.
It's so much more than what they expect. I mean, I do have to say there are some perks to it. I mean, you can get a nice reservation at a restaurant, and, you know, you can get in the front of some lines and things like that. But it also comes with its downsides. You know, your privacy is taken away in some aspects. You know, people write things about you that aren't true.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. And I think you actually write in here, you wanted this book to get out before someone starts pulling that stuff.
Yeah.
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 And job well done.
Thank you.
Well, and congratulations on a great career.
Thank
and
you.
sounds like you're living life quite well.
I am.
And you're here for this Creating a Movement for Humanity 101.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that much?
I don't really know much about it other than what I've found out since I've been here with Neil Lester, who is the host.
Yes.
But I feel like it's something worth, you know, going forward with what I see they do with homeless people and,
Yes.
you know, really giving back to the community. And I'm happy to be a part of that.
Well, it's good to meet you. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank
and
you so
best
much.
of luck.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.